I was sure that after hundreds of episodes it would be hard to surprise me. But then a sword with a name emerges, lying on the bottom of the sea for thousands of years, and the most interesting thing is that it is still sharp. Next to it is a cup, and instead of wine, there is ashes. A mini-skeleton that changes the evolution of the first step on land. A lion bone like a Swiss knife, only 130,000 years before the brand. A toilet aged 250 million years where the first butterflies lie. A childish fertility statue turned out to be a goddess of death, and somewhere under the sand of Giza, perhaps, lies the second Sphinx. New discoveries by archaeologists that will make us look at our history in a new way. Hi friend, you are on the Curtop channel. First step from the water. Not far from Edinburgh, in an abandoned quarry, paleontologists lifted a slab of volcanic ash and saw a tiny skeleton, only 10 centimeters, but with distinct paws and a paddle-like tail. They called the find West Lothiana. It no longer has gills, which means it breathed air, but its skin is smooth. It is still afraid of drying out. Analysis of zircons showed the age, 346 million years. 14 million before the official exit of vertebrates to land. The paws already hint at the future. Tiny wrists and fingers, almost like ours. The animal lived on the edge of a swamp, crawled out for insects, and instantly rolled back into the water. One such compromise organism moves the starting line of terrestrial evolution and shows that there are still many empty cells in the ancient calendar. Goddess of Death. Cyprus, Lem settlement, a small limestone figurine from around 3.5 thousand years BC. A female silhouette, broad shoulders, arms at the side, a stump head. Usually, such figurines are interpreted as fertility figurines, but with this one, everything went wrong. The first modern owner was Lord Elfont. Within 6 years, all 7 members of his family died. The figurine was passed on, and similar stories happened in the next 3 houses. Sudden deaths, illnesses, accidents. When the new owner suspected a connection, he donated the figurine to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh. There, the rumors only grew stronger. One of the curators working with the exhibit died within a year. This is how the nickname Goddess of Death was born. What is real and what is legend? There are few documents on the early owners, the dates do not always match. Probably part of the curse grew out of coincidences and retellings in the press, but the chain itself is so frightening that the figure has firmly established itself in the cursed collections along with Egyptian mummies and Bassano vases. The irony is that initially it was most likely made as a symbol of life and fertility, a statue of a goddess who should bring children and not take them. Today, the exhibit is shown with the caveat, archaeology is a fact. The curse is the culture around the fact. But if I talk about strange finds, I can't pass by the Lemba goddess. A rare case when a small piece of limestone gave birth to a legend that survived the 4,000-year journey from a Cypriot village to a museum display case. Bassano vase. Northern Italy, 15th century. A young bride is given a silver-carved vase for her wedding. The night ends with a murder. The bride dies with the vase in her hands and manages to curse the gift. Then the vessel wanders among relatives, and each new owner soon dies. History repeats itself so many times that the thing begins to be feared more than any weapon. At the end of the 20th century, the vase was allegedly dug up again. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with an inscription in English, "Beware. This vase brings death." The warning did not help. A pharmacist, a surgeon, an archaeologist, all left after contact with the object. In despair, the vase was thrown out of the window. A policeman was almost hit. Museums refused to take it. Then the trail goes cold. There is very little documentary evidence of this chain on the internet. What we have before us is more a legend than a verified museum artifact. But the legend lives on for decades and continues to pop up in collections of cursed things. Sometimes things become part of history not because archaeologists have studied them, but because storytellers have remembered them. Prehistoric butterfly. Imagine a quarter-billion-year-old public toilet. In northwestern Argentina, the rock is covered with fossilized piles of ancient dicynodonts, herbivores the size of hippos. Scientists crush one of these coprolites, expecting to find only plant mush, but under the microscope, microscopic scales flash with iridescence. tiny plates that today cover the wings of butterflies and moths. There are almost 100 of them, and each fits perfectly into the structure of modern lepidopterans. The age of the layer is 247 million years. This is 46 million years older than all known butterfly fossils. This means that the first night flyers were already fluttering over prehistoric forests while there were no flowers or pollinating beetles on land. The species will be named Ampatyrieloisae, after the young researcher who managed to describe the find but died of cancer. The tiny scale closes a huge gap between the molecular clock of evolution and the stone record, reminding us that even poop hides keys to big history. Bird plane. 25 to 28 million years ago, pelagornithids flew in the skies above the oceans, the largest flying birds of all that we know. The wingspan reached more than 7 meters. It is almost a small airplane. The bones are thin, hollow like tubes. The mass at such a size remained relatively small, so the bird could stay in the air for hours. The main tool is a long beak with bone teeth along the edges. These are not real teeth, but bone growths, but they gave an excellent grip. It was possible to catch slippery fish and cephalopods right at the surface of the water. It is believed that pelagornithids took off from coastal cliffs. They spread their wings, caught the updraft, and then glided over the waves, almost without flapping their wings. They are found all over the world: South Carolina, Morocco, Japan, New Zealand, even Antarctica. So the birds flew across the oceans following the winds and upwelling zones where fish were most abundant. But their unique flying skills made them vulnerable. By the end of the Pliocene, the climate had cooled, wind patterns had changed, feeding strips had disappeared, and competition with marine mammals had increased. The genus Pelagornis disappeared. Its place was partially taken by albatrosses, but none grew to such sizes. Pelagornis is a good example of evolution to the maximum. Nature squeezed everything it could out of flight, but the price was high: dependence on a stable ocean climate. Factory on bones. 125,000 years ago, Lake Neumark Nord, today's Germany. Archaeologists raised 120,000 bone fragments and 16,000 flint tools from a layer of silt. Not knives, but heavy hammers. Almost all the long bones of horses, deer, and aurochs are split in the same way. A neat longitudinal seam, as if they were opened for the filling. Nearby are ancient fireplaces. In the ashes, charred nuts, acorns, blackthorn. But the main thing is the so-called bone cauldrons. Tubular bones are burned on the outside, cleaned out on the inside, and placed vertically in the fire. In them, the brain was melted to liquid fat, a concentrate of calories, without which the glacial diet of protein alone would lead to rabbit disease and death. The scenario is clear. Hunters dragged carcasses to the water, crushed them, rendered the fat, mixed them with plant additives, and probably stored or exchanged them for other resources. This is not the improvisation of hungry vagabonds. It looks more like a food factory, where the production, processing, and logistics of finished products took place. Lake Neumark Nord destroys the image of a primitive Neanderthal. Before us are people who planned a seasonal menu, understood the chemistry of food, and put fatty fuel on stream long before the appearance of the first clay pot. Bone multitool. Belgium, Skladina Cave. Archaeologists find the tibia of a cave lion, a giant predator that Neanderthals themselves usually feared. But this bone has experienced a second life. It has 4 different tools. One end is a chisel for gouging out wood. The long side is ground down and used to sharpen flint blades. The adjacent area is smoothed into a round scraper for cleaning skins. The opposite end is left sharp to pierce skin or hides. The age of the layer is about 130,000 years, the end of the Sol glaciation. The people who left the multi-tool did not simply break the bone for the sake of the tip. They invented a real ancestor of the Swiss knife. Small notches are preserved on the surface, traces of at least 2 stages of sharpening. This is both economy and technology. Instead of 4 separate devices, there is one, but modular. The fact that lion bone was chosen as the material is also noteworthy. Thick-walled, elastic, it holds the cutting edge longer than deer bone. This means that killing a predator became not only a victory in hunting, but also a supplier of premium raw materials for future weapons and tools. As a result, we see the first multifunctional in history. The Stone Age did not need rivets to invent the principle of the Swiss knife. Byzantine urn. Sutton Hoo is familiar to everyone for its ship burial, but nearby in Bromswell they found something no less strange, a 6th century copper vessel made in the eastern Mediterranean. On the outside is a hunting scene, naked warriors, leaping lions, pure luxury export. On the rim is a Greek inscription, "Drink to your health, Lord Earl, and live happily for many years." When they dug up the base, it turned out that there was no one left to drink from it. Inside there was dust with large pieces of horse bone, a typical marker of Anglo-Saxon nobility. Among the ashes they found a carved comb made of deer horn. If its teeth contain DNA, scientists will be able to determine the sex and age of the deceased. The Byzantine cup reached Anglo-Saxon Britain and, instead of wine, received the ashes of a nobleman, living proof that trade links crisscrossed Europe long before modern motorways. The First King. Belize, Caracol Jungle. For nearly 40 years, married archaeologists Arlen and Diana Chase dug stairs, markets, and dams here until they reached the heart of the Kayana complex, the heavenly place. Beneath the slabs, they found a narrow passageway that opened onto a chamber painted with cinnabar. On the floor was a skeleton, its shoulders entwined with jade beads. Nearby were 11 painted vessels, carved bone tubes, a mosaic mask, and spondylus shells the color of raw meat. Hieroglyphs on the stelae had long named the city's first ruler Tikabchak, Thunderhand. Now the text matched the bone, dating to around 350, just 2 or 3 decades after his ascension, 331. It turns out that Caracol was an independent force even before the famous arrival of the Teotihuacan envoys in 378. It did not wake up from foreign influence. It already ruled, traded, and collected tribute. The things around the body speak for themselves. Jade is a sign of royal blood, cinnabar is a symbol of strength and sacrifice, spondylus shells are long-distance trade through the Caribbean, and thin bone tubes are an attribute of priests who inhaled cocoa powder before rituals. All this is not a random collection, but a portrait of a state, collected in the personal capsule of its founder. For scientists, this is not just a skeleton, but the first chapter of the history of Caracol, hidden by vines for almost 1,500 years. Hidden relief. Nineveh, Northern Palace. During excavations, the floor was removed. Underneath it was a layer of dense clay, and under the clay, a huge stone slab, 6 by 3 meters, weighing about 12 tons. A solemn scene is carved on it. King Ashurbanipal between the patron god Ashur and the warlike Ishtar. On the edges, a fishman and a scorpion man, mythical guardians of the border between the world of people and gods. The pattern on the clothes, the feathers of the arrows, even the claws of the lions are visible so clearly as if the work was finished yesterday. Something else is unusual. The relief was carefully removed from the wall, placed face down and covered with earth. It is clear from the ceramics on top, this was done a couple of centuries after the fall of Assyria in Hellenistic times. Why hide such a thing? At the moment, there are 2 versions. The first is that the temple servants saved the shrine from robbers. The second is that the new authorities wanted to remove the reminder of the old ideology, but did not dare to destroy the image of the gods and the king. The slab lay in the ground for 2,000 years, even preserving traces of red paint in the folds of clothing. Now it gives a complete portrait of the Assyrian government and reminds us, sometimes history is not erased, but simply buried deeper, hoping that it will be forgotten. Second Sphinx. Giza, eastern edge of the plateau. Everyone knows the stone guardian at the Pyramid of Khafre, but in ancient texts, Egyptologist Bassem Ash-Sham found a strange duality. The Sphinx father of fear and the Sphinx mother of fear. And here's what comes together. Between the front paws of the current Sphinx stands the stele of Thutmose IV. On it are 2 creatures, not one. A clay tablet found nearby tells of a statue that was struck by lightning and its head was broken. The strike hit the metal crown. Lightning loves metal. During recent ground-penetrating radar surveys, geophysicists from Cairo University examined a dune south of the current Sphinx. At a depth of about 4 meters, the devices recorded an elongated dense contour about 60 meters long, corresponding to the size of the body of the surviving monument without a head. The signature differs from the usual limestone strata, which speaks in favor of a man-made object. There are several reasons why the find is not excavated. Firstly, there is a risk of sand falling and cracks appearing on the walls of neighboring temples. Secondly, official structures are afraid of disputes around the change in the general appearance of the plateau. While excavation is prohibited, the potential Mother Sphinx remains under the sand, but the complex actually preserves half of the composition conceived by its creators. Two sphinxes were carved from the same rock about 10,000 years ago when the Sahara climate was humid. Later, one lost its head from a lightning strike. The destroyed statue was covered with sand. Superstitious priests did not risk restoring the bad sign. 1,000 years later, Thutmose IV dug up and restored the surviving father of fear and kept silent about the second. Since then, we have seen only half of the plan. And while the mysterious shape lies beneath the sand, the story of Giza remains unfinished, like a missing page in a great book. Camar Dinosaur. Cambodia, Taprom Temple, late 12th century. In one of the niches there is a palm-sized bas-relief, the body of a lizard, 4 legs, and a row of plates on the back. Tourists immediately dubbed it a Stegosaurus, because in textbooks such plates are only found on late Jurassic dinosaurs. The relief itself is carved at the same level as dozens of other ornaments. The stone is the same, gray sandstone. The wall is covered with a thin biological patina. The thickness of the coating was measured with a laser scanner. It is uniform, without clean tracks that would be left by new carving. Chemical analysis of the patina showed an age of at least 500 years. That is, the work dates back to the period of construction of the temple. What archaeologists noticed: the plates match in shape and are located in the same way as palm leaves, which Taprom artists often use to frame animal figures. If you mentally remove the leaf border, you are left with an ordinary rhinoceros, a large body, massive legs, a short tail. This interpretation fits into the iconography of the complex. There are plenty of rhinos in the bas-reliefs of Angkor. Now I will explain why the dinosaur version arose. By the early 2000s, the plaque on the stone had partially collapsed. The edges of the leaves were erased and the silhouette began to resemble the outline of plates. The photo went around the forums of paleomyth lovers and the story grew without checking the source. When the panel was cleaned with microabrasive in 2023, remnants of leaf veins and small decorative cuts appeared, which are never depicted on the backs of dinosaurs. Conclusion: this is an ordinary Khmer rhinoceros, and the plates are just palm leaves erased by time. One worn ornament turned into a dinosaur sensation, although in front of us is only a worn-out background. The ant skull. Catamarca, Argentina. Construction workers were digging a trench for a water pipe and came across a row of burial urns. In one of them, they found a human skull of such a strange shape that the local press dubbed it the Ant-Man's head. The shape is hard to mistake for ordinary. The forehead is stretched forward, the crown is stretched back, the skull looks like it's in a vise. People's first reactions were naturally towards aliens and genetics, but archaeologists quickly cooled the temperature. The Cienaga and Aguada cultures lived in these lands between the 3rd and 12th centuries, and they practiced artificial deformation of the skull. They did it simply. They wrapped the baby's head in cloth or fixed it between planks. The soft bones gradually changed shape. You'll ask, of course, why? It's simple. Beauty, belonging to a group, social status. Everything is like now, tattoos or body modifications. It is worth noting that there is almost no evidence of harm to health from such practices. The child's skull is flexible. The brain grows, taking up available space. Therefore, most deformed skulls show no signs of injury or developmental delay. There is an alternative explanation: hydrocephalus, fluid accumulation, which was pointed out by Heidi Dawson Hobbies. But then we would expect other changes. Thinned bones, asymmetry. Such a skull is a good example of why such finds should not be immediately dismissed as historical anomalies. Sometimes a strange shape is not a message from aliens, but a very human desire to look like our own. Golden Ring. Jerusalem, City of David. Under the floor of a late Roman, early Byzantine building, archaeologists have found a small gold ring about 2,300 years old, that is, still from the Second Temple period and Hellenistic influence. It is smooth, without inserts, modest. The ring was not lying separately, but in the backfilled technical layer of the foundation. Construction filler immediately went above it. This means that it was placed during the laying of the foundation and not accidentally lost. And this is not an isolated case. In the same area, a second similar ring and several small pieces of jewelry were found within a year, also under the foundation. Researchers recall a Hellenistic custom. Engaged girls or their families buried jewelry and children's things in the foundation of a new house, a symbol of the transition to adulthood and a request for protection. The character matches. Small size, female context, gold that was worn every day. The artifact is currently in the Israel Antiquities Authority's laboratory. The metal is being analyzed for alloys, traces of garnet or other stone are being looked for, and it is being compared with similar items to determine its origin. Ram in the thicket. Southern Iraq. In 1928, Leonard Woolley opens up a royal cemetery and pulls out of the rubble what at first looks like a fallen wooden stick with lumps of metal. After restoration, a figure appears. An animal on its hind legs reaches for a branched bush structure. It was given a poetic nickname, Ram in the Thicket, although zoologically it is more likely a goat with curled horns. Age, about 2,550 BC, that is 4.5 thousand years. The figurines were found in a rich burial of a noble Sumerian, next to whom lay the sacrificial remains, 68 women and 5 men. This was a status ritual. A person did not go to the afterlife alone. The ram is made of wood covered with thin sheets of metal, copper gilding, inlaid with lapis lazuli and a shell. The diamond-shaped pattern on the base may refer to the mountains. The branched bush is often interpreted as the world tree, the connection between earth and sky. There is a practical version. The figurine served as stands for bowls for the ritual of sacrifice. The animal stands on its hind legs and supports a branch. A vessel with a drink or sacrificial liquid could be placed there during the ceremony. The Sumerian world is concentrated in one small thing: the sacrifice of the elite, the work of the best artisans, the symbolism of the cosmos and practical altar inventory. The ram in the thicket reminds us that for ancient people, beauty, faith, and a household object lived peacefully in one, and that is why such artifacts survive thousands of years. Ramses' sword. Northwest Egypt, archaeological site of Tel El Abkain on the coast. During excavations here, a bronze sword was found with the name of Ramses II engraved on it, the same pharaoh who ruled for more than 60 years in the 13th century BC. Signed weapons are rare, so the find immediately became key. The layer in which the blade lay is associated with military activity on the coast. Archaeologists are cautiously discussing several scenarios: a garrison weapon, a trophy after a clash, or a material trace of battles with the so-called Sea Peoples. For now, these are working versions. There is no final answer. Analyses are in progress. The context is reinforced by other finds. 2 limestone blocks with inscriptions were discovered nearby. One repeats the name of Ramses II, the other mentions an official named Bey. In the same horizon, there was a whole cow laid out as a sacrifice. Nearby are burnt cow bones near the furnaces. Such offerings are associated with ideas of strength, abundance, and divine protection. In addition, a series of scarabs was collected. One reads Amun, Lord of the Sky, and a fragment of a bronze ring reads Amun Horakti. There are also beads with semi-precious inserts. Even if the sword was not in battle, it connects a specific ruler with a specific coast. And if the connections with coastal wars are confirmed, we will have before us a direct artifact of Egypt's struggle for control of the sea. Spear of the Gods. The sacred island of Okinoshima in the Genkai Strait was closed to everyone except male priests for centuries. Gifts were brought here to the sea deities before voyages to Korea. In the mid-20th century, a short iron spear was found under a boulder, about 30 centimeters, completely rusty. It was hidden in a museum warehouse. Nothing special, as it seemed then. A second study turned the idea upside down. Computer tomography and X-rays revealed a delicate ornament under the crust. Elongated phoenixes, intertwined curls, and tracks of gold hammered into the metal using the complex Kinzogen technique. This means that this is not a utilitarian weapon but a ritual gift of the highest level. Age, about 1,100 years, the time when the early state of Yamato, late Kofun tradition, actively turned to the gods of the sea for patronage. Okinoshima has yielded thousands of similar sacrificial objects, mirrors, beads, weapons, and is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The spear is currently undergoing conservation in a project run by the Agency for Cultural Affairs, with every millimeter scanned and documented. It's a good reminder that a layer of rust can hide the prayer of an era. Timeless Sword. Hubei, China, 1965. A wooden sheath is pulled out of a flooded tomb, and inside it is a bronze blade that has lain in the water for 2,500 years and is still shining. This is the sword of Gujian, the ruler of the Yue Kingdom. The metal surprised everyone. Bronze with additives that slow down corrosion. The surface is polished to a mirror. The geometric pattern on the blade has not worn off. After preservation, the blade easily cuts a sheet of paper. The handle was once covered with silk. The guard is decorated with inserts. 8 ancient hieroglyphs are engraved on the blade. Gujian, king of Yue, made this sword for himself. The signature records the owner, about whom Chinese chronicles wrote as a stubborn ruler. He survived defeat, accumulated strength, took revenge. Why did the blade withstand centuries? The thick lacquered scabbard barely let oxygen through, the water in the tomb was quiet, and the composition of the bronze was chosen so that the edge would hold. The result was an ideal capsule. The Gujian sword breaks the usual image of a rough, ancient weapon. Before us is a product of high technology and personal status, which has survived to this day in working order. Lednica Face. Poland, Lednica Lake. During work on the coastal zone of the first Piast fortress, archaeologists raised a 1.34-meter-long oak beam, part of the fortress hook that kept the rampart from falling apart. At one end there is a carved human face, an oval rim, an arc above the forehead, a rounded chin. The size is approximately 13.5 by 10 centimeters. The face did not look into the fortress, but towards the water. Dendrochronology gave the exact age of the tree felling, around 960 to 975 AD, the same time when the prince's residence, chapel, and baptismal pools stood on Lednis Island. For the Slavs of the 10th century, carved human faces on building elements are a rarity. Here the image was brought out to the outside of the rampart as if someone addressed it to the lake. Perhaps this is the image of the spirit of water or the patron saint of the crossing. Perhaps a reminder of Christianity on the verge of paganism. The island is a key point of baptism of the Polish lands. They compare it with the Slavic anthropomorphic figurines from Wolan and four-faced idols. There are stylistic echoes, but no direct analogies. The carved face is currently undergoing conservation. The wood is being stabilized so that it does not crack in the air. The plan is to display the find in the Museum of the First Piasts in the second half of 2026. Sword from the Vistula. Poland. The Vistula River, Tarkomin area. A fisherman notices a piece of iron sticking out of the water in the shallows, pulls it, and gets out a whole medieval sword. The blade is almost undamaged in the sediment. The guard, round pommel, and cross sign on the handle are visible. The fisherman immediately handed the weapon over to restorers in Warsaw. Experts confirmed the sword is genuine, dating back to the Middle Ages. They will say more precisely after analyzing the metal and the shape of the blade. The river constantly changes its course, washes away the banks, and brings to light what has been lying in the silt for centuries. So the weapon could have come off a boat, drowned during the crossing, or been thrown into the water after a battle. Now the blade is undergoing conservation. They will remove corrosion, stabilize the metal, check the microcuts of the edge, and try to count the hallmarks. For us, this is a chance to catch a living detail of medieval Poland. Not a museum copy, but a sword that lay for centuries in the Vistula River safe and chose the moment to return. Roman Road. Manchester, Liverpool Road. The asphalt was removed for repairs, and just 40 centimeters below, a paved Roman road was revealed. The layers are visible like a slice of cake. The original backfill, leveling, repair layers of gravel. The road was regularly corrected so that potholes did not form. Archaeologists call it the best Roman find in the city center in the last 20 years. The road went to a fort that once stood nearby. Along with the roadbed, household items were raised, ceramic fragments, pieces of decorative glass, the usual road trash of life, frozen under a modern street. After conservation, the site will be documented, the items will be cleaned and transferred to the exhibition. mound under the fort. Russia. Salakard, territory of the Obdorsky Fort. When digging a trench, they uncovered a burial ground of the Neolithic period about 5,000 years old. More than 12.5 burials. The rituals are different. Some bodies are tightly wrapped in birch bark. Others lie in boats, miniature vessels for the journey to the underworld. The burial pits were dug up to 2 meters deep with steps down, a reverse staircase like an inverted ziggurat. The walls were lined with boards. Everything was generously sprinkled with ochre. On top was a wooden flooring, then an embankment. Inverted vessels were placed on the embankment. The soil sank. The vessels fell inside and preserved the layer. In a number of chambers, there are traces of fire. They were set on fire before the final backfill. The dead were also sprinkled with ochre and supplied with things. The main sensation is ancient copper items, a trapezoid pendant, fragments of a bronze plate, and small parts. In the Arctic 5,000 years ago, metal was either a long-distance exchange or a chain of intermediaries, which means that northerners did not live in isolation. Before us is not a boring cemetery, but a whole collection of artifacts and rituals. Birch bark as a cocoon, a boat as a symbol of transition, fire as purification, ochre as the blood of the earth, copper as prestige. The North shows that complex rituals and long-distance connections reached here much earlier than we are accustomed to thinking. This has never been found before. Norway, Oslo, the port area of Bjørvika. During excavations in the city, archaeologists found almost 3,000 medieval items, and the lion's share is leather. Shoes of all shapes, low shoes, high boots, pairs with perforations and embossing. There are wrinkles on the folds, patches on the soles. People repaired their shoes until the last minute. Leather was valuable. They also found more than 20 fragments of leather bags, a reminder that there were no pockets in clothes. Everything was worn on the belt or tied to clothes. There are sheaths from swords and knives. Personal weapons were considered as common accessories as a wallet. The most touching thing is more than 40 children's shoes, some the size of a palm. The same design, the same patches, just miniature. Children were shod like adults, and their things were also taken care of. The accumulation was found in the area of old coastal dumps near the Alna River. Garbage was thrown near the water, and seasonal floods washed everything into the lowlands, covered it with new silt, and preserved it without oxygen. Therefore, the skin did not crumble but lay in layers until our days. Twice eaten. Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, approximately 1.8 million years ago. Archaeologists have found 2 different sets of bite marks on the bones of early humans. The first is wide, jagged notches with chisel-like edges. These are left by a crocodile. The second layer, already on top of the first, is narrow bites and long, shallow scratches typical of a large cat, a leopard, or similar predator. It turns out that the people were first grabbed by a crocodile, then a predator from land got to the remains. Unfortunately, at that time, this was a common environment in the early savanna. Water attracts both prey and predators. Such finds completely erase the information that humans have always been hunters. 2 million years ago, humans were simply one element in the food chain. At this stage of evolution, we ourselves were often a resource. A standard trip for water for a person was a chance to get food and the same chance to be eaten by predators twice, a good indication of how dangerous the watering hole area was before humans became the top predators. Letterweights. Turkey, Uzungabirch, ancient Diocesarea. In a layer of late Roman times, archaeologists found a set of portable scales together with a set of iron weights, and each weight was made in the shape of a Greek letter. Iron usually turns into rust flakes, but here the letters are legible. This means that the set was quickly covered with a damp layer and was not touched anymore. Why the letters? This is a simple marking of the face value. A merchant or market controller takes out a beam, hangs the goods on one pan, and on the other one letters in turn, until it equalizes. A letter is easier to remember than an abstract number, delta plus epsilon, and everyone sees that the combination is honest. Try to file such a figured shape. You will immediately change the mass and spoil the outline. Anyone will notice. Therefore, the letter is also a protection against cheating. The range is from small on the fingers to heavier pieces, enough to collect the required weight in a few steps. This is not a temple treasure. This is a working tool, like a cash register today. While we argue about the prices on the check, people here 1,800 years ago looked at a set of letters and knew they would not be cheated. A small set shows that the market was based not only on silver, but also on trust in the form of metal, transformed into an alphabet, if such things lay almost on the surface. I wonder what is even deeper. If you want more archaeological discoveries, like this video and leave a comment. Thanks for your views. Bye everyone.